Well, welcome back, listeners of Bandofla, our podcast. My name is Fevzi Hussein, and I'm your host. This is episode number 47. So it's been a while since we were last recording in the studio, and as usual, lots going on in the world. I've actually got COVID at the moment after two shutdowns, or two lockdowns, I should say. I finally succumbed at the weekend with the 2 lines on the lateral flow, and it's been set off and confirmed. Symptoms wise, I don't feel great, a little bit of laboured breathing, very achy. I haven't lost my taste and smell, fortunately, but coughing and a lot of the symptoms that are associated. So yeah, it's hopefully I'll be come through this and I'll be up ready back into work, because there's a lot going on. So yeah, I think the fact that I've been vaccinated twice and I've had the boosters as well, I guess that's helped me. But I guess we don't know. I know everyone's got different views on that, and I think unfortunately, there's with what's happening with this government, there are going to be many more people who will become very ill, and sadly, some of those people are going to pass away. I'm classed as being clinically extremely vulnerable. I think that's the phrase the government was using. You can't go and get a PCR anymore. You can't get any free lateral flow tests. Everything is pay as you go. And if you check I did a quick bit of research. If you look at Boots, for example, Boots have started selling the lateral flow tests, and you pay about a tenner for a pack of 5 lateral flow tests. These were obviously all free before, and you do have to wonder why we can't continue to get these tests on the National Health Service. The government paid, I've covered this a lot, and 36 billion pounds. You can't even appreciate how big a sum of money that is. We've spent 36 billion on a completely crap track and trace system, and now we're being charged for lateral flow tests, and if you want a PCR test, we're being proper screwed over a barrel by this government. I don't know. There's so many unanswered questions, but the Tories, this government has been unrelenting in its efforts to make those people who are less fortunate in society, to make them suffer even more. The Red Wall voters in the northern part of England who voted for Boris and the Conservatives, I think even they know that they've been done like kippers. But if you look at, going back to this Boots arrangement, there's a picture which is available on the internet from when Boris was in Eton, and there was this Bullingdon club set up, and there's a number of people in that photo who are now key ministers, and one of the people also in that photo is the owner, I understand, of Boots, the chemist. So it's, again, you look at how everything's becoming privatized. Our health services are becoming privatized. It's not even through the back door now. It's pretty blatant. I know we're not at the position that our brothers and sisters in America face. But you know, this is well on the way to becoming like that, sadly, in my humble opinion. I'm gonna touch on Ukraine and just update you because it's still very desperate. The war between Ukraine and Russia goes on, and lots of innocent people are dying. But before we do that, literally breaking news, the Metropolitan Police have issued fines to the Prime Minister and to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, fixed penalty fines for being in breach of the rules on breakdown. So it's unprecedented that we have a Prime Minister and he's the next most senior person in the government who have, it's been confirmed, they've broken the law. I've been listening to some of the discussion around this, and I think many people are dismayed at the blatant disregard that the Prime Minister has shown at a time when the country was in lockdown, when people couldn't be next to loved ones in hospital beds or couldn't go to gravesites when their loved ones were being buried. And it has now been confirmed that the Prime Minister has broken the law. I was listening to LBC, and I didn't catch the presenter's name. Eddie, a guy called Eddie was the presenter. Eddie anyway, most people were calling and saying, who the hell is this Prime Minister to think he's above the law? He's the one who set the law and he broke it. So, you know, it's quite incredulous that he's done that, you know. But I'm scratching my head because there was still some people calling in and saying, get over it. You know, if it was an IKEA manager who'd, you know, broken the law in the lockdown rules and breached them, we wouldn't be batting an eyelid. I mean, I don't know whether these are people who are set up, you know, to call LBC and make those types of comments, you know, but there's a bit of a difference between the Prime Minister who's making the laws to a manager of an IKEA superstore. And either this individual is not incredibly bright to be able to see that point. I don't understand how even a small number of people can defend the Prime Minister with regards to this outcome. And already there are calls for a vote of no confidence. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. Obviously, that gives you an idea when this episode is being recorded. It's actually Tuesday, the 12th of April, as we record. So yes, the Prime Minister's questions will be very, very interesting. And I think Boris, you know, I've previously said he's got nothing on Teflon, or Teflon hasn't got nothing on him, because the amount of shit that's been thrown at Boris Johnson in the last 2 years, and the man's still there, the man's still standing. It doesn't, you know, we've got mainstream media, and apart from some journalists who aren't scared to hold the Conservatives and this government to account, I'm afraid most journalists are either too scared to answer those searching questions that need to be asked, or they're just incompetent, you know, a bit like a Prime Minister. So, but let's see what is going to happen. That's going to be some interesting few days ahead. I think I want to touch on Ukraine now, because it is still, there's still no, even though there's been a little bit of progress in relation to some talks that were organized in Antalya in in Turkey, where representatives from both the Russian and Ukrainian governments have made some progress, and fingers crossed that that progress will continue and there will be an end to the conflict soon. But I wanted to touch on the issue around what constitutes a war crime. So we did some research, and I was checking a website called dw.com, which has got some really good stories on this subject. Now, the International Criminal Court is the body who looks into these issues, investigates allegations of war crimes. And I've been hearing the politicians in this country talk about the residential areas that are being attacked, which are clearly the case in some of these Ukrainian cities, heavily populated with civilians. And there's a big call for war crimes to be to be investigated. And I go back to our last episode and the point I made where the poor people of Syria in towns like Idlib, in towns like Aleppo and towns like Homs, you go onto the internet and check what is left of those cities. There is just concrete rubble, and the credibility of organizations like the International Criminal Court, for me, comes into question, because you can't pick and choose what is a war crime. And this argument and these scenarios extend into many other conflict zones around the world, in the Middle East, beyond. And, you have to apply consistency when you try to hold regimes to account. So like I said, what constitutes a war crime? According to the dw.com website, there are 3 areas that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, will look at. These are distinction, proportionality, and precaution. So to decide whether an individual or a military has committed a war crime, international humanitarian law lays down these 3 principles: distinction, proportionality, and precaution, as I've just said. So proportionality prohibits armies from responding to an attack with excessive violence. An example being is if a soldier is killed, a retaliation would not permit bombing of an entire city, and that would be regarded as very disproportionate. It's also illegal to target objectives that are expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objectives, which would be deemed excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage that is anticipated. Precaution requires parties to a conflict to avoid or minimize the harm done to a civilian population. Finally, the principle of distinction says that you have to be constantly trying to distinguish between civilian and belligerent populations and objects. So attacking a barracks where there are people who have said they no longer participate in the conflict can be regarded as a war crime. And the same goes for bombing a military base where there are generators that supply hospitals with electricity. This information, it's very helpful. I got this from a guy called Mark Kirsten, who is from the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Thank you for that information, Mark. Let's touch on the cost of living, because we've been covering this for a number of episodes, and people, you now regularly hear what Bandofla has been saying for months, that people are choosing between basically choosing between heating their home and eating food, providing food for their family. It's never, I can't recall in my living memory things being as stark, as terrible as they are when it comes to the cost of living. I actually, what I find interesting in a really sad way, if you look at a country like Cyprus, I know in the north of Cyprus, where my family are from, when I go back to see them, they are effectively off grid. And they use, if for those people who have a gas fire system, they would use gas cylinders or oil. And there are actually people now, I think there was some people in the UK who are off grid, people out in very rural areas, but there's now people who are going off grid as a choice because they can't afford the electricity and the gas charges that these utilities companies are charging. The price increases are phenomenal. Are they justified? I don't think so. How can you justify someone paying dual fuel of £150 a month, and then their direct debit has come in or renewed at something like £450 a month? Some people are having fuel bills of £5,000 a year. This is, you're talking new mortgage payment territory here. A lot of the listeners here, I know this episode is going to be very UK orientated. So apologies to our overseas listeners, but you'll be able to get a good insight into how horrible things are for people living in the UK at the moment, how difficult they are. And I know cost of living issues is a global issue, global problem, but you can home in on what's going on in the UK. There is a man in the UK who's a well-known advisor, finance advisor. His name's Martin Lewis. And when Martin Lewis warns of civil unrest, the shit is hitting the fan. And the government and Rishi Sunak has recently done his spring budget, which was a load of pants. Very, very little given, much more being taken away than being given, as usual, which is typical of a Tory government. Martin Lewis has warned of civil unrest, and you have to ask, what is the government doing to alleviate this? Going back to LBC, there was James O'Brien recently was interviewing a caller, and this caller, she was crying. I think if you go to the LBC website, she was crying because she has switched off her boiler. She can't afford now to heat the home. And in terms of feeding the family, she feeds her children and she eats whatever the children leave. So she eats the children's scraps, the leftovers. I don't think this is an unusual scenario. This is being replicated in homes across the United Kingdom. We've already heard that the budget is going to effectively force, I think, 500,000 more people into poverty. And the fascinating thing was that this caller was actually in work. So she was employed. She didn't indicate what her earnings was, but she is unable to heat her home and to provide the free meals a day, certainly for all members of the family. So this is the reality, listeners. I've been ranting and raving. I'm not going to swear because I've got, my energy's a bit low at the moment, but I'm feeling people's pain from all the stories I'm reading. People struggling, really, really struggling, and the government just is making things worse and worse. And and then so you hear all this, you hear all this on one hand, and then you also hear that what little is left in terms of our crown jewels, that the national grid has been sold by the government to an Australian company for £4.2 billion. So, this is what this government is about. We had a manifesto in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn that was going to, look to renationalise our utilities, our water, our gas, our postal services, and much more, the trains, and I think that there's the first part of renationalisation has started with ScotRail, if I have seen the stories correct. So that's a bit of good news, but energy bills are absolutely skyrocketing, and it's difficult. It's very, very difficult, and we just have to hope and pray that there's going to be some change of fortune in the coming weeks, in the coming months. I would draw your attention to an energy company called Utilita. Now, Utilita are one of the smaller energy companies. They're still in operation. They haven't gone bust like a number of other energy firms. And great credit to Utilita. They have given out energy saving advice, energy saving awareness, information on what products, what items uses the most electricity, for example, so people can be a little bit more informed when it comes to trying to save energy. So I'm with Octopus at the moment. I think Octopus are fairly reasonable, but then regarded as one of the top 6, and I will probably be moving to Utilita. So I'm quite happy to give a positive plug, because I've heard good things about them. We do not do advertising on this show. We do not monetize our episodes. We refuse to do that. So if we do mention a company, it is for the good of consumers. So the other point on cost of living is standing charges. There's quite a lot of discussion in terms of criticism, in terms of these companies who are all putting up their standing charges quite significantly, and that doesn't relate to the cost of gas or electricity. I had a story that there hasn't been a lot of wind, that hasn't been generating, the wind farms haven't been generating electricity as much as they would have liked. I know in Surrey, my bins were being blown across the other road, not that long ago, and it has been windy. I think that's a loads of codswallop personally. It's always excuse after excuse from these companies that are making a lot of money, even when it comes to water. I checked my bill And there are two standing charges. You have a standing charge for water and a standing charge for waste. And so even before you've used a single drop of water, I pay £90 a year. Like I said before, I've even used a drop of water. And I would suggest you look at your bills and see what your standing charges are as well. So we've done a little bit on the cost of living, and this takes me conveniently on to a really important demonstration that's planned. I believe it's June the 18th. It's been called by the TUC. Leading the charge for this new deal for workers is the Communication Workers Union, with excellent support from other trade unions. Now, this new deal for workers is also coinciding as a protest in terms of the cost of living. Now, I know that the CW are going to have a huge presence at this demonstration. More details will be available on the TUC website, Trade Union Congress. Do check with your own trade unions, and do get behind that rally, that demonstration, because we have to show that there is a real need for pushing ahead with this new deal for workers. So please look out for that and support that. It's going to be a great day out. Just sticking to the theme of trade unions. Obviously, you all would have heard about the shocking news that P&O sacking 800 workers through the scandalous fire and rehire. I think it was great to hear RMT representatives at a recent CWU event in Liverpool. There's lots of disputes going on. Employers are trying it on, and the trade unions are going to fight back. So if you're not in a trade union already, I think you need to wise up, and you really need to join a trade union, because they're the people who are going to have your back. The UCU, solidarity to UCU members who are still on strike, fighting to protect their terms and conditions, specifically the attacks on their pensions. I can also report that there was a ballot in the post office of CW members, and they returned a staggering 97% yes vote in the ballot. So, like I said, if you're not in a trade union already, this is all about solidarity. This is all about collectivism. This is all about sticking together and making sure you put your best foot forward when it comes to your terms and conditions. And that, I think it'd be remiss of me not to give a massive shout out to the new Amazon workers in New York, who voted by a majority to set up a new Amazon labor union branch. And this was done despite a huge kind of program of disruption by Amazon in terms of putting in some union busting tactics, which was all coordinated by the company who the richest person in the world owns. Massive kudos to Christian Smalls, who is the Amazon union leader, who helped to make this happen. We are trying to make contact with Christian, so if anyone can help to hook Wonderful up with this guy, please do drop us a shout, either through the Anchor platform or through Twitter or through email. I'll confirm the details at the end of this show. I think just going back to the cost of living thing, I should have added that we have a guaranteed way to save you money in terms of your utilities. It's a surefire, guaranteed way to help you save money. And it's a very simple way. And it really is as simple as this: stop voting for the Conservatives. you know, every other party will have a more positive agenda in terms of giving back more than what the Conservatives are taking from those most vulnerable in society. So please, please stop voting Conservatives. I think the local elections are coming up on the 5th of May, Thursday, the 5th of May. And already the signs are looking terribly bleak for Boris. I noticed there was a couple of by-elections recently, both were in the control of Conservatives, and both have been handed over to alternative control. I think one was taken by the Greens and one by the Liberal Democrats. I think this is a taste of things to come, and Boris is going to get his butt whipped come. Did I just say that? I think the Conservatives are going to have a very, very difficult time on the 5th of May. And I don't think Boris will be in a job in the next few days, given the revelations that have come out today in relation to the breaking of the law and the lockdown rules. But let's wait and see. So I think that, I mean, on that, I'm not even going to tell you to vote Labour in those local elections. You vote who you want to vote for, who you think you can relate to the most, but just don't vote blue. And you know, if you're a socialist listening to this, then you'll have your own principles that you stand by. I'll leave that there. I think that what I want to touch on now is I did touch on the situation, the really sad story around Ricky Real, who was who his mother Sukhdev Real believes her son was killed in a racist murder back in 1997. We will be having an interview with Sukhdev. Sukhdev has been recognised for her amazing efforts in seeking justice. It's staggering, actually. In addition to her relentless, solid campaigning, she's not going to give up. She's also been subject to spying in the UK by the UK police for demanding an investigation into what she believes was a racist murder. She has actually written a book about what has happened, what she believes has happened to Ricky. The book launch is on the 3rd of July. Please look out for it. It's important that justice is done for the Real family, for Sukhdev. The book is called Silence is Not an Option. Sukhdev Bandofla wishes you, great success with regards to the launch of the book. I know you are, you're really pushing the campaign hard, and we hope that your campaign makes the progress that you so desperately want. This is taking place at the Queen Mary University. So look out for the book. It's called Silence is Not an Option, and it's on the 3rd of July is when it's released. So coming to the end of episode 47. This has been a bit of a short show. I hope you don't mind. Please forgive me. So just to remind you, you can follow us on Twitter. We're getting some brilliant feedback. Really appreciate all the love which is being shown towards the Bandofla podcast. On Twitter, you can follow us at _Bandofla. It's BANDOFLA. I think I've got a bit of brain fog there. BANDOFLA, sorry. We're also contactable via email. You can send that to podcastbandofla@gmail.com. And also via the Anchor platform, you can leave us a message direct. So I'm going to leave you with these messages. Do keep safe at all times. You can listen to Bandofla on any decent podcast platform. And like I said, keep safe, be good. Until next time, my name is Fevzi Hussain and I'm your host. Goodbye.